So I want to welcome you to the panel portion. I'm Robert Burns Nixon. I work with Owen. We do education and economic development as a nonprofit for San Francisco around technology, innovation, and design industries. And we also work on the advisory board for South by Southwest in wearable health technologies and also cultural technologies. So we have a great panel today. We're going to take a top level view of wearables, and we're going to place it. The questions are all based around the industry context, then the design context, and then we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about future development insights. Okay, I'll briefly introduce everybody by name, and I'll allow them to give a little self-introduction as well. So first up, we have James Blaha from Diplopia Game. We have Dr. Sabine Seymour from Moondial, Jin Suan from Deutsch LA, Mark Levinson from Protos Eyewear, and Allison Lewis from Switch Embassy. So first, James, you want to give a brief self-introduction? Yeah.
My name is James Blaha, and I was born with a lazy eye. So for people who don't know what lazy eye is, it's basically a condition where one of your eyes is weaker than the other one for whatever reason, and your brain learns to ignore the information coming from that eye, usually very early in childhood. And so we're working on a game, a virtual reality game that improves the vision of people with lazy eye, using right now the Oculus Rift, the Rovis Dive, Google Cardboard, these new head-mounted displays that are coming out. And the way we do that is by basically taking single objects in the virtual scene and increasing the brightness to the weaker eye and dimming the brightness to the stronger eye. And what that does is it breaks through the suppression of the weaker eye long enough to train the person to use both their eyes together. And in my case, I used the game for about 20 hours over 5 weeks, and I was able to gain the use of my weak eye and gain 3D vision for the first time. So right now we're in an alpha test, and we're going to be beginning a study with UCSF in the next couple of months. So if anyone knows anyone with lazy eye in the Bay Area, or if you have it and might be interested in the study, please contact me. Thanks.
Okay. Great, thanks. Next up, we have Dr. Sabine Seymour.
Well, this is hard to beat. This is awesome. So I have been doing wearable technology for a very, very long time, a couple of decades now, and I actually do not like the word wearable technology the way it is actually appropriated right now. I do everything that is soft, meaning that to me a wearable is actually something that I literally wear, as what we in the fashion industry seem to be calling it as a wearable. Yeah, I live in New York, so I'm based in New York. We have a consultancy there. I also coach a project at IBEAM, the Art and Technology Center, called Computational Fashion. I co-direct a project where we're thinking about the psychology of wearing technology with the New School of Social Research. I am working on, or I direct a research project called Computational Cellulose, where we are thinking about making the actual textile itself smart in sensing and actuating at the same time. So literally working on a nanoscale and pulp, changing the actual pulp of the fiber itself and not just coating it. So anyway, I'm doing a lot of things around really making computation soft. That's all I'm trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Jin Suan from Deutsch.
You can call me Jin.
Oh, okay.
I'm an experienced designer and researcher. Basically, just a fancy term for just being able to learn about people's behavior, specifically cultural aspects of either product or service, and then being able to see what's coming next. And that's sort of what I'm doing at Deutsch as part of a think tank group there. And I've been doing, focusing on novel interaction and wearable for, for a little bit over 5 years, but been in digital for about a decade or so. So, I'm looking to see what comes out of this whole wearable, and I'm interested in it just as you are. by being here today. And I just opened up a new hackerspace in downtown Los Angeles. And if you want to know more about that place, feel free to ask me.
Oh, sorry. And next is Mark Levinson. Thanks.
Hi guys. I have a background in industrial design. I actually studied here, got my bachelor's here, and I've been consulting for a few years with a number of different companies for industrial design. Then I founded a company called Protos Eyewear, where we use 3D printing to make custom tailored fit eyewear. And then on a broader sense, we've been really trying to push 3D printing from a process that we use as industrial designers for prototyping into something that's actually a legitimate manufacturing process for mass customization.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have Allison Lewis.
Hi, my name's Allison Lewis. I'm founder and CEO of Switch Embassy. I've been working in wearable technology since I first took Sabine's class in 2002. And I'm really happy to see how far it's come. It's exciting for us. All of us that have been here kind of waiting for the tech world to catch up. And I think it's finally ready. In the past 3 years, we're finally able to use smartphones to control our devices, and everything's going smaller and faster and better. So I decided to start a company, and we have a product out there now that you guys maybe have seen. It's called T-Shirt OS 2.0. It's a washable, wearable, programmable T-shirt you can use with your mobile phone. And it's built upon a platform that we're working on, and the platform is here inside this bag as well. This is Thea. So I just like to show what we do. I think it's fun. So the idea is that you can draw, add text, add animations, and one product becomes infinite number of products. And we believe in a future where we use soft textiles to create truly dynamic and interactive fashion that can be controlled by almost anything. When these cell phones go away, maybe it is your brain waves controlling your bag or your lapel pin. I don't know. So I'm excited to be here, and always open to hear people's responses to what we're doing. So happy to talk to you after.
Great, thank you very much. So just to explain a little of the format, so I'm gonna throw some questions out. Everybody can jump in as they see fit to answer what they want to. So we're gonna do some panel questions, and then we're gonna open up to Q&A afterwards. And I thought I'd mention too that Jen ended with a kind of a Sony quote, but I started in materials and prototype manufacturing with Sony in Japan way back in the day. So yeah, the original Walkman company. Okay, so. So first off, the discussion questions. Cultural phenomena such as rise of social media, street art, startup economy, especially in San Francisco, influences politics, the economics, and also fashion. But what we want to know is, what is the cultural context driving the broad interest in wearable technology now?
I guess... if I'm understanding the question correctly, there's a couple of threads that I think are pretty interesting for me, at least. So, one would be the quantified self movement, which is basically where you're tracking a lot of information about you, so that you can kind of look back at it retroactively and kind of see how you operate as a person, and try to make adjustments. So like with sleeping habits, eating habits, things like that. And then another one is mass customization. So where a lot of times people like to buy products, especially fashion products, that represent themselves, and they'll pick brands and certain products that they think represent them, where technology is coming around to a point where we're able to customize things a lot more. And you can go beyond just associating yourself with a brand, but actually have a custom product that's yours. So those are two threads that I was thinking of.
Okay, and then maybe just a follow on. Do you have another about convergence? Because a lot of talk about this industry coming together now because of convergence, and we're seeing, fashion mixed with technology, industrial, consumer electronics. Everybody's jumping in. So,
In my opinion, I don't think it's really about convergence is there, but to a customer's eyes, convergence doesn't mean anything. To them, all they want to do is be able to do something that they care about, and they're represented in a way that they want to be represented. So, to me, wearables, where they need to be at is truly have a definition of what cultural relevancy of a wearable device is. I think without that, it's hard to understand what it does, first of all, but how is it going to help us in our social everyday settings? Is that time for something? Time for a break? Time for a cookie? Anyway, I think, without that cultural relevancy, for example, if you look at a lot of the wearable companies, or if you look at any technology companies, we're gonna just use some random companies which happen to be Apple and Google, because this is an example that we can all kind of relate to. Well, let's look at Google Plus. Okay, so it's a social networking platform, right? We also have Facebook. Why did Google fail whereas Facebook didn't? Well, my first answer is cultural relevancy. There's no cultural relevancy to Google Plus whatsoever. They were so technology focused that they sort of lost sense of what it really means to people. And without that meaning, an object, device, or service is meaningless. It's completely blind to people. So I think you need to have that sort of deep-rooted in people before you can actually sell a product. And I think especially for a wearable product, because nothing like this has ever existed before. Before the introduction of Walkman, what was really out there in terms of something you could wear and listen at the same time? There weren't that many products out there. I'm pretty sure there were small things that you could, low-tech things that you could wear, but to that extent, it was huge.
Thanks. Okay.
And again, another thing is the Beats. So with Apple's acquisition of Beats, they've not only gathered intellectual knowledge, but of audio products, but they've garnered whole folks that are rooting behind this whole culture, right? Of music and the whole hip hop culture and the whole shebang. They bought the entire thing. So imagine they were to start a wearable device, they could leverage that cultural relevancy to have people understand what it does, but more importantly, it's actually cool to wear it. I think that is the ultimate thing when it comes to wearables, and whoever gets that right is going to be the biggest winner.
And we're all kind of waiting to see what Apple does in terms of the luxury market and fashion, for see how long how their brand can extend beyond their traditional industry group. So, yeah.
But at the same time, I gotta give a lot of credit to Google though. Google's done an excellent job of producing this product. Utilizing their technology know-how to produce this device that fits on your head. I mean, if you ever try to build something like this, it's really incredibly difficult. I did a sprint a couple months ago on a wearable device, and it's incredible how difficult it is to fit all these devices into a small, area. And I think from a technology standpoint of view, they did a wonderful job. It's just that in terms of the actual implementation and evangelizing folks to wear it, it was a difficult process for them.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was just going to say, so you're saying you're waiting for Apple. Is that because you think they're actually more capable of pushing things with cultural relevance more so than?
Well, fashion and wearables are obviously an attractive market. They always have been, even for technology. I mean, internally they're always looking at sports and they're looking at fashion. Just strategically to look and see what their options are. But Apple's also made a lot of plays with with Yves Saint Laurent and with Angela Arendt, right? So. We're wondering, how far are they going to, wearables, sure, but how far are they also going to extend into the luxury segment itself? Because there are a lot of parallels for a technology company that has the credibility, right, and the install base to match the quality standards, right? So that's an interesting area.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, yeah.
I think another part of this is the rise of crowdfunding. So with crowdfunding, you can make a much riskier product, and most of the cutting edge wearable stuff is really different than what people are used to wearing. And so with crowdfunding, you can figure out if there's a market for your wearable pretty cheaply and get the funding at the same time to build it.
Yeah, that's a good point. You mean? Okay, so the next question is, so what is a wearable strategy? And if we're really going to talk about the Internet of Things and everything, in the future necessarily being connected in some way or the other, does every company need to have a wearable strategy then going forward?
Well, the easy answer to that is no. Strategy, that's a big one. So being in wearables for a while, it's interesting to me now how exciting it is for everybody and looking at all these new perspectives and how people are focused a lot more on fashion now and communication and design. As far as strategy is concerned, I'm really interested. I'm going to go geek out for a little bit. I'm really interested in things that like Qualcomm are doing and Intel are doing, and I think if people need to be thinking about strategy, they need to be thinking a lot about from the chip level, right, which isn't normally what I talk about, frankly, but when it comes to this, it's about how these chips are being embedded and what functionalities they have, because that really leads you to understand where this whole area can go. There's a lot of factors for play and strategy. Finding the right manufacturers, understanding like how to build things is a huge barrier to entry, like huge. Because manufacturers just don't know how to put textiles with hard electronics. Right. So as you see more and more, I believe that Intel's talking with CFDA's, I can't remember what it is, fashion designers, the Council of Fashion Designers of America, and also like opening ceremony.
The opening ceremony team, yeah.
Yeah,
and Barney's, right?
Team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if I was thinking about strategy, I would actually look towards some of the technology companies first in that way, and then I would look at it different ways. I would look at the fashion companies, because fashion companies are so creative and such an iterative design process. I don't know how to explain it, but I think that there's a lot of inspiration there. And so when you put those two things together, you can start to think about how your company could fit into this. And for some people, fashion is not part of their strategy or their agenda. So why even think about it?
Well,
but if you are, then should my Coca-Cola be connected to my shirt? Maybe?
Well, do you think Starbucks is going to come out with a wearable strategy pretty soon? I do.
Who?
Starbucks.
Yeah,
I mean, when we're talking about connected universe, and their whole thing is the throughput per operation per day, right, in terms of their numbers. So, right, there's a lot of things you can do there. So
it works really great for tracking and for the whole like quantified self. It works really well for large companies to be thinking about that and how to understand how their employees are working and what kind of movements they're making and how to be more efficient. But I think that I really honestly don't think everybody needs to be in there.
Virgin America just start trying out Google Glass, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought they were playing with some blanket technology.
I think they were playing with Google Glass from what I heard on some blog somewhere.
Well, I also
think.
Go ahead.
So I think that in terms of a strategy, when you can't just put it in one egg in one basket or whatever you call this. It's so for example, an airline, you have security issues, you have things of you have certain elements where Google Glass or some type of glass that is augmented reality. It doesn't really need to be Google Glass. It can be anything. There are lots of actually companies out there that have been in that space of augmented reality for years, very specific for workwear, very specific for people that have to do work on very difficult machinery, have to work hands-free, have wireless connection to the outside world. And that actually extends. So Google Glass is the only product per se that actually was launched as a consumer type product, and thus we know about it. The same about 3D printing. 3D printing, additive manufacturing has been around for 30 odd years. Right. So it's only that because MakerBot and the guys out of Brooklyn, Bray and his team put it together, cut it out there, got it out into the consumers. So thus it is becoming a space that is interesting. So when you speak about a strategy, for what?
Well, I think because, I'll just jump in. So if we think about the future connected universe, do you want to be one of the not connected elements, even if you're an accounting firm, but everything's connected? You know what I mean? How do you play in that? Because then, you're on the outside, right? So in that context of an Internet of Things, a truly connected universe where everything's connected and people, expect that of you, even if, you're a Muni or you're a Starbucks or, you're an accounting firm. Do you think you need to look at how you play within a connected universe in terms of even a wearable?
I think to your point, I think you brought a good point about how wearables started as a specialized tool. And I think, a lot of technologies, the users tend to be very specialized, and then it becomes available to the broader market. Like if you look at wearable devices, they've been around for quite a bit actually. It's just that they haven't been introduced to people, to the public, general public, wide enough for them to actually understand what it is. Military has been looking into this, and they've been using it for quite a bit. I think eventually, what technology or product goes through this sort of cycle. The cycle I meant by usually it's a sort of unknown technology like multi-touch. It was around since the 80s, but didn't become commercially viable till recently. And then when it becomes introduced like this, becomes very novel, very very trendy to use something like that. So everybody kind of jumps in the bandwagon, and then at that point, a lot of blowares come out, and a lot of shit products come out, and as a result, people get frustrated. And that was I think the period of Nokia, the candy bar phones, right? People were just like, why the fuck are we using these things? And when we have laptops, and then eventually the companies caught on. So one company we all know, kind of jumped on bandwagon on that, and then sort of took it to the next level. So I think it's gonna take some time for wearable. It's gonna go through the same cycle, but I think it's gonna happen much faster than what we experienced in the past. Obviously, with things moving much rapidly nowadays. But I think I'd be kind of interested to see what sort of bloatware are gonna be created as a result of this sort of moving towards closer to something, right?
Right.
You might want to add to that?
It's sort of like a combination between different things. But to Allison's point, I mean, looking into a larger, with Qualcomm's, Intel, and so forth. But I think it's extremely interesting to look at also the networking infrastructure. To think at, when you talk about the Internet of Things, fantastic. Well, we don't have the computational power in the world right now to actually even connect anything. So if I want to connect I mentioned this also yesterday, but if I connect everything that I wear right now, and we all do in the space even, trust me that most of the, Google, server farm's going to be, done within a few seconds. So we really need to have extremely much more computational power. We need to understand, different algorithms, absolutely new ways of really identifying data, making sure that we really capture these things in an appropriate way. So actually also thinking about different standards. I mean, the Bluetooth, low power Bluetooth, don't get me wrong, it's not going to solve the Internet of Things issue. do, in particular when I want to wear stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to think about that is extremely technology driven. So the entire aspect of, and also the word fashion, I don't necessarily, again, yesterday I said, for me, it's a social science. It's not necessarily, has nothing to do with the actual construction of a garment. So, the fashion industry is sort of even the wrong word to say, because it's a garment construction industry. Whoever wears garments builds stuff that we wear on the body. So, fashion industry just seems to be one of the industries, but it's not the end of me or the means of the end or whatever. Sorry, I'm not from America, and I'm really tired. And it's my second day in San Francisco from New York, and I'm fading away. Yeah. So I'm sorry if I'm like. So I think it's a very, very important question to really think exactly about that, about really solving the much larger issues as well that have far less to do. And then the other things are thinking about the social sciences, like what you'd said before, really thinking about how do we as human beings communicate. What are our social behaviors? What are our cultural behaviors? How we actually think about aesthetics in various ways. How we think, how are the cultural differences versus, West Coast, East Coast, Latin America, then go to Europe. Oh my goodness, it's like all over the place. It's very, very different. So there is not going to be one recipe at all. And it's going to be also very interesting to think about, who is going to be the driving factors. So I think I love that lazy. Seriously, it's a fantastic thing because you're like your own user. You're your own best critical customer. And I think that's what we forget a lot right now is the whole wearable craziness that has been going on. And Allison knows I've been doing this literally for, it's like a long time. So, it's very, very important that we are much more critical about what we do as well, and whether it actually makes sense, and whether it solves a particular problem, in order that problem doesn't need to be something, as prominent as what you are doing, but it can also be like, I just really literally want to, have a really good time and aesthetically look at, and thus to have an emotional connection to what I wear and the psychological functionality as well. So I think the range of things is just so big, and it's just such a cool space to be in, but there's so many tiny little things we need to look at.
Right, and I think, and then on the technology, also what Allison said too is, we talk about Intel, we're looking at Intel too, because if we do look at, fashion in terms of the design and also the luxury market, then, obviously the hardware's got to meet the same quality and craftsmanship standards and longevity standards of a quality, a luxury product, right? And, Intel's one of those companies that can do that, right? And so for people that are looking at development things, in wearables, a modular platform approach based on an Intel or something like that with a standard of quality that's ensured, right, is a good initial approach. So,
why luxury?
Well, because luxury. Well, we're saying that wearables and then luxury and then high fashion and stuff like that. If you add technology to something, it has to meet the same craftsmanship and quality standards of a luxury product. But how do you do that with technology, right? And I think that's one of the hindrances to the industry. But Intel has, it has a quality reputation. It has the background. It has the track record that you don't find. So, they're not going to just necessarily take a startup with, a complicated technology and then roll it out across Louis Vuitton, right? So that's probably not going to happen. But a modular approach might. Yeah. And
to add to that, this is more of a question. To keep that quality that you just mentioned, do the devices have to be both, do all the devices have to be server-sided, or is it going to be a combination server-sided and all the calculations done within the process itself? Maybe Allison has some more insights about this, but I'm really curious what the future of hardware in terms of wearable device will be, because initially back in the days, about 10 years ago or so, maybe it was longer ago. Do you guys remember OnLive? OnLive, the server-sided gaming technology, now is owned by Sonda Technologies, have split off, and now Sony owns some of that for their new PlayStation 1 service that you could subscribe, and basically you have this low power computer in front of your TV, and then all the rendering is done on the server side, and then it's streamed to you. But it requires that you have a very high powered or high speed internet connection in order for this to work. So at the time when this idea was conceived, by this time around, we would have fast enough connections in every home so that this idea would be possible. But unfortunately, their idea didn't quite catch up, or at least the internet speed didn't quite catch up to what it needs to be today. So that's sort of still to be determined. But I'd be curious kind of to see what you guys' opinions about that direction.
Since we're working on a platform concept that can be integrated into multiple pieces of clothing, I'll tell you our strategy as best that I can without giving away too much. Okay. We start by the computation being in the cell phone, and the majority of very little computation inside the product itself because the cell phones are so powerful. But when I look at the future of these chips and these IOCs that are coming out, you can move a lot of the computation directly onto the garments themselves. And I think that's a really powerful place to be. And hopefully I'll be working with Sabine's fabrics someday that do that. So, because I'm not going to be the one that's making those fabrics. Right. But I certainly look to different types of companies and how they're approaching building these items. It's very, everybody always says, oh, it's so difficult. It is. It's very difficult. The body is soft. It's supple. It moves. Things are draping and moving right now. You guys can tell, like, my skirt's too short, and I'm like kind of like sitting like this, Technology is not used to that. It doesn't know how to act in this environment. It doesn't know that I need to, it's not going to react. Maybe, but wouldn't it be nice if my skirt just suddenly went down here automatically or something? I think it would be great. But I'm doing fine. And I'm just making a point that there's a big gap, and it's exciting to me right now because I see manufacturers starting to fill this gap with new materials and new ways of thinking about integrating the chips into the fabrics themselves so that they are inherently intelligent. And I think that is like really super cool, and coming from someone who's not from a sci-fi background at all. I just got into it later in life, oddly, like a year ago. But I just think that, all those dreams that you have in your head of like clicking a button, your whole outfit like responding, that's going to happen. It's going to happen. People are working on it. And so I think when you're thinking about strategy, and that has a response to the identity of the person in real time so that the experience is theirs and their own, which gives then the technology more meaning. And so it's like this nice cycle that it all comes back to the self. So you can share it with other people, or you can have your technology to yourself. When it's on the body, it's just a powerful place. I kind of went off there.
And, just a very pragmatic. So basically, what you're saying is, where shall the computation be? Shall the data be transferred? I mean, right now, when you take about a cell phone, for example, you have a Wi-Fi module, you have UMTS or 4G, and you have Bluetooth. And you might have other standards as well, NFC, depending on which country you're at. So you have one device, and you have 3 different or 4, sometimes even more, ways to actually wirelessly transfer data. Well, it's just going to be different standards, different data, but I think that it's still going to be various streams depending on where and how much. And so,
So from my perspective, we're a software company. We're not building any hardware, any wearable hardware, but we're really interested in the data we can get from the hardware everyone else is building. And so, I think even if you're not going to be building anything, you have to be looking at what's coming out and ask yourself, how can I use this?
So then your technology roadmap's very strategic, right? For the technology roadmap and then your technology partners?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about also the design aesthetics and what people can be designing for. So the current consensus on wearable design dictates the product must achieve standalone aesthetic value, or the technology must be invisible. That's kind of the standard of thought now around wearable technology. So, but is there a cultural argument for a future overt technocentric aesthetic, or technology itself as a fashion accessory? So how we view actually the design elements. And I just add.
I'm just gonna speak. I'm gonna speak to
Okay.
Mark's belt. Can you show everybody your belt? So a friend of mine, Matthew Waldman, makes a product called Nuka, and it's all about future fashion and futurism. And he's actually wearing the belt right now. And I think it's just a matter of personal style and taste. And I do think there's going to be people that enjoy seeing like electronic threads. We saw something last night at the what was the show? At Autodesk, where a very high-end designer at Crease actually had twinkling lights on their dresses, but not just that. They showed the connections through the layer of the clothing and made it part of the aesthetic.
From Switzerland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I do think that, you know, the more variety, the better. That's the thing about fashion is you can just have whatever you want.
And I think that geek culture will always be there. That market is always gonna be there. It will never be big. It'll never be like, you know, like iPhone status or, you know, Android status. But it'll always be there. I think the question really is it gonna be the mainstream? Is it gonna be the next big thing that everybody's, you know, gonna be wearing it so that it's so ubiquitous and nobody recognizes it anymore? I think that is sort of the question, and I think eventually we're gonna get there. I think we have to define what the aesthetic is as a community. For example, aesthetic is very subjective because what we think is aesthetically pleasing may not be aesthetically pleasing for somebody else. For example, let's say if you go to somewhere in some rural continent, let's say somewhere you went to some place in Africa, and these group of tribes have maybe, you know, body piercing or whatnot, right? Which they, you know, see them as very attractive, right? And therefore that's why they wear them. But to us, that is not. So I think there's a lot of subjective things in aesthetic, and I think a lot of culture defines the aesthetics. And eventually, when those things get popular enough, I think people will kind of jump on the bandwagon. And we still don't know what that aesthetic that people fall for would be. But I think it's something that we will have to work out.
Well, I'm just wondering, you know, technology if technology becomes the aesthetic, are we ready
I don't
for that?
think technology will ever become a mainstream aesthetic by itself.
I disagree. I think it's inevitable that it will be. I think like as things progress, it's going to be seamless, and there won't really be.
Exactly, that's not my point. Yeah, it's going to be so seamless that you won't see it as technology.
Well, and I'll just elaborate a little bit because, you know, so right now we're saying make it beautiful or make it invisible, right? But, you know, when you talk about fashion, and this is always a big question because we know about all the technology stuff too, but, you know, the integration, the initial approach, you know, to the fashion and, you know, and then the breakdown maybe into ready to wear and stuff like that. But, you know, there is a fashion approach. We were talking with the trend forecasters that, you know, make it beautiful, make it invisible, but a lot of high fashion is actually comical, about a wink and a nod. So you might come out with a 1950s, you know, TV on your head, you know, whether it serves any purpose other than just, you know, the technology, overt, obvious, in-your-face technology aspect, you know, is kind of irrelevant in that thing. So in that case, are we going to want just the signifier of technology attached to us as part of our, you know, identity going forward? So
it's gonna go both ways, I think. As you've seen from the earlier slides, I didn't mean to.
Oh,
no. You know, you saw a lot of anti-surveillance technologies, right? That are designed to kind of hide things or protect you from certain technologies out there. So I think those technologies are gonna just eventually grow, and I think. For wearables, I think that's obvious sort of, you know, track for it to follow.
But I think it'll be a subculture of people, which it is now. There's people that when they want to express themselves, technology is a big part of who they are, and they'll wear things that are overtly technological. Like you were saying, my belt. With my profession, I wear things that represent that I understand certain things in technology, and I like to show that stuff. But you know, if you're a farmer, I don't know if that's so much going to be the case. But yeah, it'll be a subculture of futurists, I guess.
But I also like, for example, I mean, what the nuke of your belt and also your glasses. I mean, to me, there are fantastic ways to actually say, hey, if I had no idea that they are 3D printed, would I care? I don't.
Right.
They look cool or not. So I think that's very important to actually really make a distinction of like really thinking about the object itself rather than like how it is made and what is it getting. I mean, I always use this metaphor of a car, I mean, I used to actually be able to fix my own car when I first got my car. Now I actually need to go into the shop to even have the littlest light changed because they have to really? And it's not just a mechanic anymore, it's an electrical engineer that actually needs to go into some parts of the car to actually get that fixed. You also have a computer, you have an onboard computer. So I don't call my car this like wearable GPS navigation system, cool, blah, 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 blah. It's a car. It just so happens it has all this additional technology. So I feel that I want to also wear stuff that sometimes it might look like it's a little techy, might it look like it's very organic. Sometimes I just wear black. Sometimes I just go with pants and jeans. I mean, just, whatever. So it's like, I'm not sure whether, like you said before, there are going to be so many different layers. It doesn't really matter. It's just one of the styles.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I think if I was if I was investing money in this, if I'm putting my $2 million or $10 billion, whatever, if I was an investor, I would probably put my money on things that are visible. They're actually making a statement rather than hiding. Because if you're hiding, think about the market value of such a product. It's going to be very hard to, I mean, in certain cases, yes, but it's going to be very difficult to sell something something you can't see, right? So,
what's that?
well, that's, I think we're talking about more of a, to the RV, no, but to the end consumer.
Yeah.
Everyday people like us.
But there's like, you tread a line with.
Yeah, it depends on the application, but I guess the main audience we're talking about, or at least I'm talking about, is consumer, the end consumers that we all interact with, just like how anybody would just go out and buy Android or iPhone.
But there's
means that the application is actually something you want to show off. It's a visible, the actuation is actually that's what you want to show off. But maybe you don't want to show anything off, and it's
there are certain cases.
There's a fine line because you start to get into like something that's appropriate to wear in a normal context, and then there's certain people that will recognize certain things that you're wearing and you be able to make a connection on that. But you can, if you're wearing too many things that are a statement, you kind of start looking like you should be hanging out at Comic-Con or you have to be on a runway to justify wearing it. So
right.
So I think it's great. Like it actually happened here when we were talking. You noticed that I have a specific belt, and that's not something that most people will notice when I'm talking to them, but when they do, I know that, okay, they're part of a certain group of people who are interested in specific things, and we can go off on a long conversation about that sort of stuff. So
and again,
the subtle things.
And again, that was visible. If you look at a lot of things, consumer products that are out there that people tend to talk about, tend to be things that are pretty visible. So like, we like to buy watches. Like watches are pretty common things that we wear, jewelries, glasses, shoes. These are all the things that we wear, and we're also making a statement at the same time. But at the same time, because of the high visibility, people tend to talk about them socially. But it also becomes a free marketing for a lot of these companies, right? Because you're basically walking, billboard when it comes to, trying to sell certain products to certain people, right?
Okay, so let's that's kind of a great lead into the next question. So Currently, we're adding components, we're adding circuitry, we're adding a lot of complexity to everyday items, right? Which kind of goes contrary to design thinking, elegant design, design for manufacturability, all these principles and stuff. So, is the future promise of wearable technology a radical simplification of even our ideas of clothing today, and a unification of our daily technology interfaces? So, right now we're doing a lot of stuff. We're taking things we already have and we're adding complexity to them. So, in the future, we're going to see a radical simplification.
I get to go first again? Yeah. So our idea is that we are future elegant. Yeah. And so I do believe that you can have a lot of complicated things going on and still have elegant design. Okay. I look at Dieter Rams as an example of something like that, who made some beautiful things. And obviously our computers as well have, we all know about Mac and how Apple made these beautiful streamlined computers. But I'm not quite sure I understand the other side of that question, which is, are we going to...
Well, I mean, in some sense, we are still trading, design in terms of for functionality, right? So we're cheating a little on design, right?
I think people in Silicon Valley are doing that, and they should stop, and they should stop right now.
Right.
And I have a very strong opinion about it, because I understand how important technology is. I use it. I work with it. I work with technology. But I think by putting technology first, I think you're in danger of not considering the human being. And the body is a very complicated space with a long history, and fashion has a long history. So you need to be very aware of that social and cultural history of fashion before you get started. And I think that should come first in the conversation, and the technology concept should actually come second to make an elegant design. That's my thought process there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, in part of this is, are we, fudging on design in terms of functionality? The other thing is, if you think of, men, they have usually they wear 5 items: shoes, pants, shirt, jacket, something like that. And then we talk about mainstream adoption of wearables. So we're talking about really replacing, either adding a completely new category of something that everybody's going to want to wear on a daily basis, or we're replacing a staple item that's something that has, technology integration. But, that's a big challenge if you're talking about that, especially if it's more complex and more gadgeted up than what the simple things that we tend to wear daily. It's this question, right? So which direction is it going to go? And also, just from main design aspect, the simpler it is, the more elegant in terms of design generally, right? So
I suggest looking at the fan. Everybody talks about the watch, but look at the fan as the first wearable tech. It's an accessory. Right. It has its own language. It has its own design. But there's also an entire language around it. The way you held it, the way you moved it, the way you folded it. Talk to somebody else across the room. Mm-hmm. And I think, to me, that is probably one of the best examples of how you can add complication and still have elegance in the same place.
Okay.
I think you brought an interesting point. I think there are a whole slew of interaction design patterns that we haven't tapped. They're specific to fashion items, and unfortunately, a lot of the digital designers, haven't quite grasped or had understanding of how those things could be implemented in digital products. And I think that's our job, to figure those out, try them out, and tinker around with them, and to see really what kind of interaction patterns we can achieve and apply to these wearable products. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's so you were saying you don't really like that people are putting the technology first, but I kind of like that there's people that are there doing it. They throw it out there, and then there's a backlash. It's Google Glass is an excellent example, where people are oh my God, I hate you. You're wearing this thing, and people are okay, I'll back off. And then there's an equilibrium that's found, and it seems like a lot of us are trying to kind of find that cultural fit. But it's great that there's people all over the map on that stuff, and it seems it feels really inevitable to me that there's this slow progressive progress like into this transition where everything's really integrated, and we're all just trying different parts of it, and seeing where we can push the limit to get a little bit closer to like a fully integrated technology fashion.
So does that mean that in the future our wardrobe will be completely replaced by just technology versions of what we already have, or are we going to have a whole new category? We're going to wear the same things we have for the most part, but we're going to have a new category of accessory or a garment or something that is our go-to in terms of all of our technology desires?
A little bit of both, right?
Yeah, there's always going to be like early adopters and outliers who are really celebrating the forefront and the edge of it,
Okay.
and then the rest of the world is going to kind of follow along in this seamless progression where things you don't really notice that you're moving from a phone that allows you to take phone calls to one that allows you to take photographs, and then all of a sudden you're playing games and spending money on things and interacting and posting videos. Like that stuff is just going to happen slowly without most people really noticing it. And then you'll have this category that's up there, that's early adopters, up ahead of it all the time.
I think the perfect example is Nike.
Right.
Nike Plus products. We've seen all those shoes that have Nike Plus enabled logo on the box. So like they have little space at the bottom of the sole that you can insert the sensor, and that's a whole different product line. Some may buy that product just for what it is, but for a person that's looking for specific quantified self, done in athletic wear, they would look for those things. So I think what it comes down to is the flexibility.
Okay.
Can a single product that works like any other products out there, serve as a product that can work with Internet of Things and so on and so forth. I think that is the key.
Okay.
I think that's probably the most likely area where we're going to go into. What's after that, I don't know.
Okay. And Sabine, you wanted to add something?
Well, I actually would like to throw out a question to the audience. Like, why would you wear anything that does something on your body? Like, what should it do? Parties?
That's a great example.
Keep you warm?
Rave. Like, there's a huge wearable culture around raves.
What else?
Regulate body functions if you had some sort of medical condition.
Yeah?
Stop me from being hungry. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as we can see, there are like lots of people, everybody wants something, not everybody, but there are lots of pockets of things. So in terms of does the actual design come first? Does the technology come first? I think it very much depends also first, again, on the application. How complicated is it? Where on the body do I want to have it? Is it something that's visible, not visible? What's the design aesthetic around it? What's, the functionality per se? What's, the data? What, how much data do I have to actually convey or not? Or is it useful or not? So there are a lot, it's like to really make something substantially useful for somebody and to wear it is actually much more complicated than just saying, let's make some fantastic designs. Right. And, so it's this really combination of things.
Okay. And then, so just real quick, so I'm going to conclude with the formal questions. Do you have any comments before I open it up for question and answers? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, so we'll go into the QA portion, so ask away. Yeah. Justin?
So fashion moves fast. There are multiple lines every year. Hardware moves slow. I mean, part of the reason why 3D printing took so long to reach consumer adoption was because of patents locking key technologies. How is fashion going to adopt to the fact that it takes multiple years to develop hardware products, and then those hardware products can be patented and locked up for decades? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't see hardware as necessarily moving that slow anymore, especially with 3D printing available. Like a lot of those patents are up now. For Protos as an example, we can iterate through glasses in a matter of a week. We can actually go from concept to final product within a week now that we have the process locked down. There's going to be a lot of companies that are going to be able to do that. So the development cycles are going to be able to follow that stuff. And then the electronics move just as quickly as fashion does. You know, we're following Moore's law. So if you're integrating all of these electronics, I see it following pretty well in line with that, with those trends. I don't know with stuff like yours. No, I mean your product's a good example too for a different model.
So we took that problem, and so we use software as I think software is the future, really. I mean, we talk about hardware, but it allows a garment or something to be infinitely changeable or upgradable, and that in itself means that, you know, it's not just like someone who. Have you heard of Snap Tee? You take a picture and then you send it off and you get the t-shirt with the picture immediately. Well, this is, you know, our future that we hope for is instantaneous Snap Tee. So we're talking about fashion in a microsecond, not just fashion 10 a year. So I think technology has a really great opportunity here to push the boundaries of fashion in that way. But I will agree with you that right now, as someone who's working in production and has been to China and knows how long it takes to set it all up and get everything going, there is some lag, and you're not able to, until you get really set up and going, it's very difficult to turn around multiple lines a year. So you have to think differently about how you're producing your line, and you have to, for us, it's about putting it into the software. Our line is that packaging of different imagery that you can then upload, instead of the line always having to be manufactured. Eventually, it will get better.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be an open standard. Right now, you know, we all use Arduino at some point, and Arduino is sort of that open standard for hardware devices, not to be worn, but to be to use around the house, right? So maybe there's going to be open standard. A lot of people are already working on this. Flora is one example that is already available, but it's not quite small enough yet. And I've seen numerous Kickstarters that are trying to do the same thing. So I think once we get that ideal open hardware that somebody creates, that's going to open up a whole slew of new software development, and it's going to push the wearable forward. Till then, there's going to be some rough roads ahead, but I think that's going to happen within the next couple of years.
Well, I was going to point out that this year, Intel came out with the Edison chip, and it works on Linux or Linux, whatever you choose, however you choose to say it. So that's already an open platform, that people can work off of.
Other questions for the panel? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. My name's Joe Jason. I'm with an investment firm called D&A Partners, and we invest in digital media distribution companies that are in this exact industry. What I want to say is, there was some great points here today. I do have a question. That the agility of software is there. So, and the operating systems are there. So you really have to pay attention to all of them, not just the top two. There's just the top two. One's quasi-open, one's closed. There are more open source operating systems coming for wearables and beyond. So my question is to the panel: what do you see, 10 years from today? It's always the crystal ball question, right? And Sabine is probably sick of these types of questions, right? Because I get them on panels. But does nanotech fit into this as well? And so what do you see from 10 years from now, and does nanotech fit in?
Oh, guys.
So, yes, absolutely. So I'm actually involved in a research project, as I mentioned before, where we are actually creating a sensing and basically a textile or some type of nonwoven where we manipulate the actual pulp through nanoparticles, and very much so the integration of some hardware into a garment is hopefully in about 10 years something old school, that we're going to look at the Motorola car phones we've had 20 or odd years ago and be like, oh, that's a cell phone, really? So I think it's going to be the same about that. So it's really thinking about material science. So everybody who right now we need physicists much more. We need more mathematics people that really understand code. We need to have people working in nanotech, really understanding that. We need to understand the health implications of what that actually means in a nanoscale working there. It just means it's very, very small, but it also can go through your skin. So what does that mean? Do we have to have a layer between the skin and the actual second skin and all of that? Thinking about bacteria, thinking about actually using bacteria as a virus to identify ourselves, and thus we actually can encapsulate and save our own code, our own data. So there's lots of different layers that are literally, we can have a conversation pretty far out. I can tell what I think in 20 years is going to be happening, but lots of people think I'm nuts, but it's okay. And that's really, really important. I think you really have to think like that to... and also really, really think about what do you really need? Why is the fashion industry not picking up on the technology? Why is integrating anything that is a piece of hardware into a garment so difficult? Well, so it is, and it's because of construction methodologies. It's because of the way the factories are set up right now. It's because of the conflict you were talking about, hardware and the fashion industry, the movement of, it's a lot of different layers. So the material is definitely one of the reasons or one of the solutions where it's gonna go in the future.
Let me just throw something out there as a way to expand your horizon or perspective. Have you guys heard of something called transhumanism? Yeah, transhumanism. So transhumanists, it's an organization that they believe in basically augmenting computer into our body. They work seamlessly, and some people have gone as far as chopping off their arms, their perfectly capable arms or legs, to prove that the artificial limbs are actually better than human, limbs that we have. One person, I think, chopped off both of his legs and then replaced it with another one to prove that person with artificial limb can run faster and longer. And well, that tells you kind of the extreme that that people already gone through to kind of prove their point. So this already happened, this probably happened within the last decade or over a decade ago, and I think if you're looking into the future 10 years from now on, with those kind of knowledge, I think it could, really, I don't know where it's really gonna go. I mean, I don't totally agree with transhumanist beliefs 100%. There are some beliefs that I believe that should be integrated into our future research, but certain things I feel like it goes a little too far. I haven't quite figured out whether it's something that I want to believe in yet. And I think you should too. You should think about these things and kind of, and understand what and realize that these technologies are going to impact your life eventually, within your lifetime for sure. So I think we have to decide whether these technologies are going to be for you or not. I think, to me, that's more of a question than predicting what is going to be the future, because future seems pretty, set in stone in terms of what is out there, what we've seen so far. We know that we can do these things. It's just a matter of time.
Well, I think also in terms of, nanotech is it's very, very interesting question in terms, because you need to think longevity. I mean, the basic research for some of these things, 5 years is nothing. So, so it's very interesting and very important for people to even have visions so that we can get financing in order to put into areas like that. So more research can be done and much quicker, in particular when you talk about energy problems in that sense, when we're talking about physics and so forth. So that's one pocket, and then the other pocket is really material science and putting more in that. The next is really thinking about, biodegradable electronics, where we really think about, the next generation of, when you talk about transhumanism and Ray Kurzweil and the whole that's debatable. But what's very important is thinking about electronics being something else, being made out of different types of materials rather than silicon. That also using different type of raw materials because we're running out of certain things. Also, like how can we actually not use that much but less little, and that because of not only because it's running out of the actual resource, but also the resource itself is becoming so expensive. So there are lots of different layers, and I think in particular for research that is so long and that needs really substantial machinery. I mean, if you talk about, in particular, if you talk about nanoscale, you have microscopes that are like $2-3 million microscopes in like research labs, and that's, you have a few here and there in different, bigger universities and research labs all over the world. But then and then you have some really amazing people in the open source or maker community that have fantastic ideas and don't have access to that. So there's lots of cool work to do.
Yeah.
But
I'm interested to know from your perspective, like, do you think that those projections by people like Ray Kurzweil are pretty on point, or are you saying that we need to actually be investing more effort into those types of technologies in order to get to that place within those time frames?
Well, just to answer that real quick, I think if you look at the predictions he's made, the interesting thing is most of them were on point except where it came to fashion.
Interesting.
So, and I think the most interesting technology for me in the next 5 to 10 years is augmented reality. I think they're already working on contact lens displays where you can do full alpha channel. And then we'll have sensors that can do a full 3D depth map of the room you're in. And with machine learning, machine vision, we can automatically determine what the objects in the room are. And there's just so many applications with that. And I think it's definitely coming in 5 to 10 years. And I'm excited about the applications in vision, but I think it's going to affect pretty much everything.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the vision. And I think that's one pocket. And I think there are like a few different pockets. You know what I mean? So that's what I also talked about. The applications are so important. Like why? What do we need it for?
Yeah, and eventually I think ethicality is going to be the big topic in the next 5-10 years. Just like how we talk about food and is it GMO versus non-GMO. I think consumers should be given, and also they should be given a chance to think through these things and make a decision whether I want to, be able to use these technologies that has to do with certain value versus another piece of technology that has another piece of value system. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Quick question. I know we spoke about it earlier, but you just said the consumer's choice. And you were speaking of visible or invisible technology, like as opposed to wearable technology. You showed something in your slideshow, the GPS bracelet when I'm in trouble. Obviously, somebody knows my information. And on the other hand, I could wear a collar where they can block my information. I have a choice. They coexist in my closet. I can choose to wear whatever I want. So, in terms of, is it more, I know at the end of the day it's just a black T-shirt, but if my favorite band's on it, it's more important to me, in a social setting. But it's not necessarily going to keep me warm. I mean,
Yeah.
Can't they both ideas coexist?
Absolutely.
It depends on what I want at any given time as a consumer.
Absolutely. I think it's going to coexist, no matter people want it or not. Whether the companies that produce these devices want it or not, or whether people are going to want it or not. I think it's going to happen regardless, either underground or as a DIY projects. They're going to exist in some form. I think that's sort of inevitable, and we should see more and more of those technologies in the next 5-10 years.
Any other questions for the panel? Okay, if not, okay, so I want to thank everybody and our great panel. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we want to thank CCA, of course, and the design of Wearable series. And so we're going to be here, I think, until just before 10 o'clock. So you can go ahead and please enjoy the refreshments. And you can, I think the demo tables might still be set up, okay? Thank you very much.